Hi, it's David Ostriker here in Karmiel. It's 35 degrees outside today, so I've decided to record inside where it's a little bit cooler. It's been a lot of things have changed since we last spoke, and I just want to run through a few of them until I get to the meat of the conversation. We're emerging from the Wuhan virus, the COVID virus plague, and beginning to go to work and go to beaches and do all the normal things. And God willing, everybody will remain healthy through the process. And the recovery and the economy will recover as well. Finally, after 3 elections, we actually have a government in Israel. Our priorities for sovereignty in Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley have grown much more central now that there's a government, and we had a recent visit from Secretary of State Pompeo. The 2020 Biden-Trump election and its impact on Israel is becoming much more focused. And the collapse of the Canadian Jewish News over the last couple of weeks and the rise of the jace.ca, a new website which is replacing the function of the CJA, the Canadian Jewish News, CJN, right, is good news. And I want to give a shout out to the j.ca. Enjoy it. This week's Parsha is a two-part Parsha, Parsha BeHar and Parsha Bechukotai. Parsha Bechukotai is mostly about the blessings and the curses that will fall on Israel, depending on Israel's relationship with God and his commandments. Parsha BeHar has probably one of the most famous quotes in it from the entire Torah. In fact, it's engraved on the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. And it's hard to see that engraving, but I'll show you a little piece of it here, and then I'll read you what it says. It's from Leviticus, Vayikra 25:10, and it says, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." Now, what's that connection with what's on my mind today? It's connected to the liberty of a general, lieutenant general, former lieutenant general, former national security advisor to President Trump, General Flynn. General Flynn was prosecuted some 3 years ago for lying to the FBI. On May 7th, the Department of Justice decided to drop the case after 3 years and a plea repeated twice by General Flynn of guilty. Judge Sullivan did something very unusual. He didn't accept the dismissal request immediately of the Justice Department. And yet, Justice Sullivan's decision to kind of mull this over before he proceeded raised tremendous angst throughout Washington. The idea that the Justice Department had dismissed this case infuriated the people from the Obama administration. Former Attorney General Sally Yates was flabbergasted, dumbfounded, were the quotes. Other senior DOJ officials hit the roof upon hearing the development. Some 2,000 former DOJ and FBI employees wrote a letter of complaint about the behavior of Attorney General Barr in dismissing this case. There was fury on all sides. Schiff and Nadler have both suggested that Barr needs to come before their committees to explain his behavior, and have asked the Inspector General of the DOJ to investigate Attorney General Barr's behavior. Why does the Flynn case matter to the Jews? Good question. The 2020 election will determine whether the U.S.-Israeli relationship will proceed going forward in a positive way that it has since the beginning of the Trump administration, or will it return to the days of the Biden-Obama administration, where there was actually open hostility between the leaders of the United States and Israel? That matters. It matters a great deal to every Jew, especially in a time of rising anti-Semitism. Since Judge Sullivan has continued a very unconventional path, it's mysterious, but perhaps not so mysterious. He's actually famous for being independent. Upon asking Flynn about his guilty plea of lying to the FBI in 2017, the judge, in what appeared to be an outrageous statement, warned Flynn that his behavior may well be treasonous. The consequences of treason for a 33-year veteran of the United States Army, a general, and former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, would be far worse than the error of simply misleading an FBI agent. Yet it soon became clear that the judge was out of line, and he later apologized and said that he felt terrible. And he gave Flynn more time to consider his guilty plea. And during that time, General Flynn made a decision to fire his team, his legal team, defense team, and he hired Sidney Powell, a Texas ex-prosecutor. She is the author of License to Lie and The Conviction Machine, two different books, both volumes about abusive prosecutions. Eventually, the new team, Powell and Flynn, filed for retraction of the guilty plea. And at the same time, the DOJ under Barr had looked into the case, and documentation stating that the purpose of the interview with General Flynn was not necessarily to discover the truth, but to get Flynn to lie and get him fired. Now, there was animosity towards General Flynn. He had been fired as the Defense Intelligence Chief by the Obama administration previously, and there was animosity towards him. But the desire to get him out of the way clearly was more than just personal. It was strategic. The goal was that General Flynn, as they say in Washington, knew where the bodies were buried. He knew how the intelligence organizations operated. And if they were going after Donald Trump, he was probably the only qualified member of the transition team to protect the incoming president. So getting Flynn out of the way opened the door for what later became the Russia hoax. So that was critical. And the decisions about getting Flynn out of the way came from the very top of the outgoing administration. But things were different now because Powell was on side, Sidney Powell was on side, and there was a new sheriff in town, so to speak, and William Barr had asked an independent prosecutor to investigate the Flynn case. And what did he find out? He found out that the goal of the FBI and the administration was simply to get him to lie and get him fired, getting Flynn to lie and getting him fired. Finally, it would seem that the determination of the destruction of Flynn came right from the White House. through the acting attorney general, and you guessed it, the FBI boss, James Comey. At the same time, it became clear that Flynn had been advised to plead guilty by his attorneys in order to avoid a similar abusive prosecution of his son. A partner at the law firm of his former legal team was Barack Obama's wingman, right? Former Attorney General, Fast and Furious, Eric Holder. The evidence of the FBI and DOJ misconduct was overwhelming, and Barr's DOJ moved to dismiss. But 5 days later, Sullivan said not so fast. Publicly, the outrage was growing, and Judge Sullivan then agreed to hear briefs from friends of the court. This is something that's not done in criminal cases. In fact, a week earlier, by unanimous decision, 9 justices of the Supreme Court held that amicus curiae, friends of the court, were inappropriate in criminal cases. Judge Sullivan, undeterred, pushed on, asking, this to me is like, verges on comic, but it's tragic as well, asking whether he should convict General Flynn for perjury and contempt of court. Why? Because he lied when he pleaded guilty and knew he was innocent. So now he's lying to the court and perjuring himself because he's really innocent. And for that reason, Judge Sullivan says, perhaps we should indict him and we should convict him. Further than that, he's actually asked an independent judge from New York, Judge Gleason, retired, to write an opposing brief to the position of the current Department of Justice on all of these issues. Nothing clicks so far. In spite of hiring people, in spite of 2,000 former FBI and DOJ employees calling themselves the Watergate Prosecutors, writing their own brief, federal judges have great power, and Emmett Sullivan is an expert in wielding that power. On April 8, 2009, journalist James Oliphant wrote, a federal judge Tuesday ordered a highly unusual criminal inquiry of prosecutors in the case against former Senator Ted Stevens, delivering a blistering rebuke of the Justice Department's actions and asserting that its failures extended beyond the inability to give the Alaska Republican a fair trial. In dismissing the public corruption case against Stevens, U.S. District Judge Emmett G. Sullivan railed against the government agency that he said had committed the unprecedented missteps in a feverish quest to secure the senator's conviction. Quote the judge, in nearly 25 years on the bench, I have never seen anything approaching the mishandling and misconduct I have seen in this case, Sullivan told the packed Washington courtroom. Attorney General Eric H. Holder Jr. last week asked Sullivan to void the case after he learned that the federal prosecutors had failed to turn over evidence to the lawmakers' defense. But the judge went a step further, assigning a private lawyer to investigate 6 attorneys from the Justice Department's public integrity system. Has Judge Sullivan set a trap that the former Obama prosecution team, legal, political, and media could not resist? Had they taken the bait, hook, line, and sinker? This may be Judge Sullivan's last big case as he nears retirement. And Judge Sullivan is going to exit big time. He has the power to call witnesses and to imprison through contempt of court. He despises prosecutorial misconduct, as we should all. If Judge Sullivan simply dismisses, he would have been seen as being in league with the Trump folks. But now, as an independent judge, having given everybody the opportunity to spew their anger or to make their case, he may well crush all opposition in the process of proclaiming liberty throughout the land. I may be wrong, but everything points to the judge doing a lot more than dismissing. He may well be leading the fight of draining the swamp from his bench. Only time will tell. Shabbat Shalom. David Ostriker, here in Karmiel.